Hello, everyone, and thank you for viewing this 2025 California Arts Council Grants Overview video. My name is Ariel Rubin, and I'm joined today with my colleagues Gabrielle Rosado and Jonathan Estrada. And before we get started, I'd like to bring us into this space with a land and people's acknowledgement. The California Arts Council acknowledges the original inhabitants of the lands now called California, and that California continues to be home to many indigenous communities. Generations of tribal communities developed deep understandings of the land and continue long-standing relationships with the land, water, air, plant, and animal beings through ceremony, culture, and stewardship. These communities are not only an important part of our history as contemporary Californians, but are also important voices in our understanding of this place. In acknowledging the violent history of the founding of the state of California, its support of state-sponsored genocide, the misrepresentation of indigenous peoples and their culture, and the erasure of their shared contributions to our shared history, we at the California Arts Council recognize our responsibility to these indigenous communities, and we are compelled to support tribes, tribal organizations, and related organizations, including arts organizations, in their efforts to uplift indigenous people and communities. And with these ideals in mind, I'll recognize that today I am zooming in from the homelands of the Maidu and Miwok peoples, and the California Arts Council offices are located on the homelands of the Nisenan, Maidu, Miwok, Patwin, and Winton peoples of the Sacramento region. And I'd also like to acknowledge and honor the Wilton Rancheria, the only federally recognized tribe in Sacramento County. All right. And the slides for this presentation will be available on our grants resources page on our website. So if you want to follow along that way, feel free to find that on our website. If you would like to use closed captions, please select the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen.
Here is a brief overview of what we'll be covering in this webinar. First, we'll start with a quick overview of the California Arts Council and the grant cycle. Then we'll cover general eligibility, then our grant programs, guideline elements, application elements, grant writing tips, and then we'll close out. Before diving deep into the grant-specific portions of this workshop, let's start with who we are and what we do at the CAC. The California Arts Council, or the CAC, is a state agency established in 1976. Our mission is to strengthen arts, culture, and creative expression to help build a better California for all. Our agency's work is guided by a vision of a California where all people flourish with universal access and participation in the arts. The CAC's funding is decided by the governor and legislature and comes from the state budget under local assistance. The CAC is led by an 11-member appointed council that sets policies and makes the final decisions on grant awards. On the screen, you'll see an image showing the annual grant cycle. The council holds public meetings to set funding priorities and policy goals. They vote on which grant programs to open year to year. Staff then develop the grant guidelines and the grant applications. We also start recruiting and coordinating panels of peer reviewers. When the application window opens, CAC staff launch technical assistance, office hours, and outreach services to help Californians apply for these grants. After the grant deadline, staff send eligible applications to panelists who review and rank those applications. Staff then use the application ranks to provide different funding options based on available funds and council's stated priorities. The council votes on final funding decisions at a public meeting. Staff then work with grantees to complete contracts and continue support through the grant activity period and through final reporting. Something to keep in mind is we do what we can to support as many great proposals as possible within our budget.
Each grant program has specific eligibility requirements. Always carefully review the guidelines. In general, eligible applicants must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization, a unit of city or county government, or work with a California-based nonprofit fiscal sponsor. Fiscal sponsors are nonprofit organizations that can manage CAC grant funds for groups without 501c3 status. California Native or Indigenous tribal governments are eligible. All applicants, including fiscal sponsors, must be based in California and have at least 2 years of arts programming history. 2025 grants are for organizations only. Re-granting opportunities will be available in 2026. Beginning in 2025, the CAC provided letter of agreement template is required to be used by fiscal sponsors and applicant organizations. Failure to use the CAC provided template will result in ineligibility. Other templates will not be accepted. For-profit entities, including LLCs, are not eligible, even with a fiscal sponsor. We're going to review each grant program and its general purpose. You can find comprehensive information for each grant program on our website. CAC grants can be categorized into one of 4 types: general operating, project support, administrating organizations, and partnership support. Under the general operating support category, we have the General Operating Support Grant, sometimes referred to as GEN. This is a new program that consolidates CAC general operating programs, including statewide and regional networks, cultural pathways, and arts and cultural organization general operating support. The purpose of this program is to direct funding to arts and cultural organizations in support of ongoing operations, prioritizing small organizations. Maximum request amount is $30,000. There is a 1-to-1 match required for matching funds for organizations with total revenue above $250,000 for this grant program. Total revenue restrictions: art service/network organizations with total revenue of $5 million or below can apply. Art service/network organizations or organizations with the primary purpose of providing practical services for artists, creators, culture bearers, and/or arts and cultural organizations. For example, if you were previously eligible for the SRN program, your organization would fall under this category. Arts producing or presenting organizations with a total revenue of $1.5 million or below can apply. Arts producing or presenting organizations or organizations with the primary purpose of creating or exhibiting artistic or cultural work and/or cultivating arts learning. The program specialist for this grant is Leslie Giovannini.
We have 2 grants open this year under the project-based support category. The first one is Impact Projects, or PRJ. The purpose of this program is to support arts organizations for collaborations between California-based artists and community members to address a community-defined need. Projects must use artistic practice to respond to issues experienced by historically and systemically under-resourced communities. Projects for this program should use the arts to create positive social change in their community. Maximum request amount for this grant is $25,000, and matching funds are not required. There is a total revenue restriction for this Impact Projects grant, and that is organizations with total revenues below $3 million are eligible. One thing to keep in mind is that this year, organizations can only apply to either the Impact Projects grant or our other project-based grant, Arts and Youth, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but unfortunately you cannot apply to both of those programs. Program specialist for Impact Projects is Natalie Peoples. Also under project support, we have Arts and Youth, or AAY. The Arts and Youth Grant is a new program this year. For the 2025 cycle, Council voted to consolidate all of CAC's previously offered arts education and youth-focused grants, including Artists in Schools, Arts Integration Training, Arts Education Exposure, Jumpstarts, and Creative Youth Development. The Arts and Youth program supports meaningful arts participation and learning in diverse settings and contexts for infants, children, and youth ages 0 to 25 by prioritizing programs that directly bridge barriers to access and participation. All types of projects previously funded by individual youth-focused programs are now eligible to apply under this umbrella program. The maximum request amount is $25,000, and there are no matching funds required for this grant. Again, I'll re-elevate that you can either apply to Arts and Youth or impact projects, but not both. And the program specialist for Arts and Youth is Emily Taggart.
Next, we have our Administrating Organization grants. Administrating Organization, or AOs, are larger grants for a smaller number of organizations who are responsible for granting CAC funds throughout the state or a designated region. The first is Individual Artist Fellowship, also known as IAF. The program purpose is to identify 8 administrating organizations to develop an individual artist fellowship program in their region. Each AO will re-grant funds directly to California artists at key career levels. Individual artists are not eligible to apply for this CAC opportunity, but will be able to apply to the fellowship program administered by the AO in their region in 2026. The maximum request amount differs by region with a baseline amount of $300,000. Matching funds are not required for this grant. Fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible for this opportunity, and the program specialist for this grant is Gabrielle Rosado. The next AO program we have is Folk and Traditional Arts, also known as FTA. This program supports the cultural bearers practicing folk and traditional arts across California. The CAC will award 1 or possibly more AOs to develop a program and administer funds statewide in support of these cultural expressions. The awarded AO will provide opportunities for artists, cultural bearers, and cultural organizations through grants, technical assistance, and/or capacity building efforts. Once the AO is selected this fall, these opportunities will likely be available in early 2026. We will share information on our website as these programs open up. The maximum request amount is up to $1 million each year for 2 years. Matching funds are not required for this grant, and fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible for this opportunity. The program specialist for this is Ariel Rubin.
Finally, we have our partnership grants. The State Local Partners Grant, or SLP program, is how the California Arts Council works with one official arts organization in each county to bring arts programs to local communities. In fact, we worked with them to bring this workshop to your area today. We had some in-person workshops that we use to bring this workshop to those areas, but today we are virtual. These organizations, usually local arts agencies or nonprofit arts councils, are chosen by the county's Board of Supervisors and act as the main arts contact for their region. Because of that, qualifying organizations have already been identified and the grant application is by invitation only. The whole idea is to make sure every part of California, urban or rural, has access to meaningful arts experiences and that local organizations lead the way since they know their communities best. The maximum request amount is $75,000. This program does require a 1-to-1 match for organizations with total revenues of $1 million or more in their most recently completed fiscal year. And myself, Jonathan Estrada, I am the program specialist for the SLP program. Next is the State Local Partners Mentorship Grant, which we use to establish longstanding SLPs. We have them mentor a newly appointed SLP until they're ready to be on their own. The maximum request amount is $50,000. There is no matching fund requirement. And again, I'm the program specialist, Jonathan Estrada. All CAC grant applications must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, June 5th. We highly encourage you to submit your applications early. The CAC cannot extend the deadline for any person, so please turn in your applications well ahead of the 11:59 p.m. deadline.
Next, we will review some key resources and elements to be aware of to apply successfully. CAC applications are only accepted online through our online application system, sometimes referred to as Smart Simple, GMS, or the Grants Portal. In order to apply, new applicants must register their organization in the portal first. For step-by-step instructions on how to register, we have two resources. For written step-by-step instructions, please visit page 16 on our grants manual. And for visual learners, you can watch a video tutorial called Grant Applicant Website and Registration Overview Video. Both can be found on our grant resources page, which we have a QR code for you to scan later on in the presentation. If you are a returning applicant, these same resources can be used to help certify your organization, which is done on a yearly basis to ensure any updates, such as business or mailing address and staff contacts, are captured before you apply to the current cycle's grants. For returning applicants, you can view page 17 in our grants manual for information on certifications, or you can view the organization certification contact and address changes video, also available on our grant resources page. Our grant guidelines provide an overview of each grant program and outline key information to help you prepare a strong proposal. We recommend reading the guidelines in full before starting your application. Key sections to review include program timeline, program goals, project requirements, application questions, and review criteria. Additionally, the 2025 Grants Manual is a comprehensive guide to the CAC's grant application process, covering each step from applying for a grant, panel review processes, and lastly, to managing an award. The 2025 edition includes important updates about eligibility requirements, required fiscal sponsor agreements or templates, updated contacts, and more. It is also available in Spanish.
Before we dive into application elements, let's review some general budget requirements. The CAC's definition of total revenue is the total cash inflow from your organization's most recently completed fiscal year. Cash inflow and/or income includes all earned income, such as ticket sales, and contributed income, such as grants, donations, one-time organizational funding, or operational grants. Free granting and pass-through funding are excluded from the organization's total revenue calculation for eligibility. If your total revenue is above $250,000 and you are applying for multiple CAC grants, please remember to keep the total grant request amount at 50% of your total revenue from the past fiscal year. For example, if your TR is $300,000, your sum of requested grant money cannot be more than $150,000. All programs have maximum request amounts. Be sure to observe this amount in the guidelines and design your proposal, including your budget, accordingly. Please keep in mind that the maximum request amounts are just requests. Actual awards will be determined in the allocations process depending on panel ranks and the CAC's final local assistance budget. The CAC offers grant programs that require a dollar-for-dollar match to support the awarded program, meaning organizations must raise an equivalent amount in funds or in-kind contributions. Eligible match sources include earned income, donations, and grant funds from other public or private funding organizations. State funds are not allowed. Support can come from in-kind sources to meet the matching fund requirement. In-kind contributions are non-cash donations provided by third parties for which monetary value can be determined. In-kind contributions may be in the form of space, pro bono consultancy, training, or services, organization volunteers, supplies, and other expendable property that are given free of charge to the organization. For additional information on in-kind contributions, refer to CAC in-kind contribution document, which is available on our grant resources page and also linked as a PDF on the guidelines that require this match-to-match requirement. Organizations that are awarded grants that require match should work with their internal finance team to review CAC and state requirements to track and report matching contributions. For 2 of our programs, there are restrictions based on budget size. If applying for a general operating support grant, the total revenue for arts, service, or network organizations must be below $5 million. And the total revenue for arts producing or presenting organizations must be below $1.5 million. If you're applying for impact projects, your total revenue must be below $3 million.
Now let's look more closely at the basic elements within the applications. Please note, every program has slightly different application questions, so you can review the program's specific guidelines for the complete slate of questions. We're going to go over, you're going to be asked applicant's organization information, various quantitative questions, fiscal sponsor information, if applicable. There's a narrative section, questions, there'll be questions regarding project design, timeline, community to be served, and organization's commitment to accessibility and equity. Please try to balance specificity with overall project activities in the project summary, as this will become the scope of work on your contract document at the time of award. There's a budget snapshot. All applicants will complete a budget snapshot table listing a minimum of 2 years of revenue and expense totals. Project budget snapshot is required for project-based grants. Match table snapshot, there's a source of match table where there is a matching fund requirement. You will also complete a table showing the sources where you intend to draw your matching support from. Again, matching your request one-to-one. Support materials. Support materials may include artistic work samples, letters of support or testimonials, and examples of your organization's work overall. You will want to make sure that all support materials are recent and relevant to project proposal, clearly feature and or identify lead artists, and choose a medium that best fits your proposed project outcomes. For example, if you're working in a performance discipline, consider submitting video files for your artistic work samples. You're limited to 5 support materials. Each file type has instructions on length and format. Additional support materials that exceed the requested length will not be considered by the panelists. And finally, clearly label work and give the panelists any relevant contextual or medium information in the support materials notes field. Remember, support materials will not receive higher or lower ranks based on their production quality. As an example, a video taken on your phone is great. It does not have to be overly produced. Finally, At the certification and release page, each CAC applicant must certify that they are in good standing with the Secretary of State, or SOS, at the time of application, and assure compliance with state and federal law.
Now let's go over some of the things that the California Arts Council cannot fund. You can find the full list in the What We Do Not Fund document on our website. It's also linked in the project budget section of the grant application in Smart Simple. Here are a few of the most common questions we get, but please check the full list to make sure your budget doesn't include anything that we cannot fund. Ineligible applicants include for-profit organizations, even through a fiscal sponsor, individuals, although there will be opportunities for individuals through our Individual Artist Fellowship and Folk and Traditional Arts programs once those AOs open for applications next year. Other ineligible applicants include parent-teacher associations, PTAs, or booster clubs. Some ineligible activities and items include fundraising or lobbying, projects with religious purposes, construction projects or purchases of maintenance of land and buildings, equipment purchases, although equipment rentals are eligible, food and drinks, and out-of-state travel.
This year, the Council has set specific funding priorities for the General Operating Support Grant, Impact Projects, and Arts and Youth. Two funding priorities are first-time grantees and small organizations with annual total revenue of $250,000 or less. The third funding priority is support for organizations serving communities in the lower quartiles of the California Healthy Places Index, also known as the HPI. The Healthy Places Index is a tool that maps data on social conditions that affect health. Things like education, job opportunities, income, housing, air and water quality, and more. When you provide the zip codes your program served, we will use that to determine which HPI quartiles your organization reaches. The priority is on zip codes in the lower two HPI quartiles, those with a percentile ranking between 0 and 49. These areas include many rural, remote, and lower resource communities, as well as neighborhoods within cities. These are areas that have been historically and systemically underserved, and this focus helps promote greater geographic equity across the state.
Here are some tips to help you craft a successful grant proposal. Know your audience. Your proposal is reviewed by panelists, not CAC staff or council members. These panelists are fellow Californians from across the state, artists, educators, arts administrators, and arts lovers of all backgrounds. Write clearly and directly to them. Start with the review criteria. Before you begin, read the review criteria in the program guidelines to shape your responses. Make sure you addressed every part of the question. Clearly explain what your project is, how it will happen, and why your organization is the right one to do it. Stick to the application. Panelists only review what's in your proposal. Don't assume panelists know your community or your work. They won't Google your organization or click on any links. Give yourself plenty of time. Don't wait until the last minute to register in the grants portal, begin your application, or ask questions. And here are some writing tips. Draft your answers in a separate document first. This helps you stay organized and gives you a backup copy. Copy and paste your responses into the application in the portal early to avoid tech issues. If your project includes a lead artist, let their voice come through in the narrative. Also, clearly define discipline-specific terms or jargon. Know that we want you to succeed. Join virtual office hours, check our grants resources online, and reach out individually to the program specialist if you have any questions.
So mark your calendars. The deadline is June 5th at 11:59 p.m. and no exceptions will be made. All applications must be uploaded and completed before then. It is the goal of the CAC to reach everyone who contacts us. We recommend that you contact staff well in advance of the grant deadline to ensure that you can be accommodated. Lastly, it's important to note that staff assistance is not available after 5 p.m. on the day of the grant deadline. And because of the many inquiries we receive, we do respond to those in the order that they're received. And before we close out our session, we want to share a few resources with you. The first is our grant applicant FAQs. CAC staff is regularly updating the frequently asked questions page to better assist our applicants. Please review the frequently asked questions page for immediate assistance when applying. Additionally, we have the CAC grant resources webpage. As mentioned throughout this workshop, our videos, grants materials, resource documents, policies, and required templates can be found on the grants resources webpage. And finally, virtual office hours. For further program-specific questions, you are encouraged to attend any of our virtual office hours. Please review the grant program page or the grant resources page for the up-to-date office hour schedule and links.
Follow us. Follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter, ArtBeat, where we release our updates first. And with that, we're going to close this webinar. So thank you for watching and stay connected.